Hey, what's up, guys? So welcome to the Rofkin channel. If you guys listen to this on Nation Discloses, thank you guys for listening. We are just gonna go and get right into it. I much appreciate, um, yeah, I just appreciate everyone who's listening to what's going on. There's obviously a lot of things that are outside of our control going on. I, for one, am a type of person who enjoys my freedom. I enjoy it is, I don't know if you guys know what anagram types are, but is my anagram type is I'm a type 7, and I like freedom. I like to avoid pain at all costs if possible, but it doesn't mean that I won't be confrontational. In the onset of the medical tyranny that's been taking place currently, it has come to my it has come to my attention that I really don't know how to enforce my rights. And because of that, I've been on this journey of learning, this basically this path of learning to understand how to defend myself and to protect my private rights and understand the Constitution and really actually what it means and stuff that we should have been taught in school that we were not taught, unfortunately. Um, so with that being said, I'm doing a path to freedom, and this is just a basic course, and we'll just get right into it. So this is the basics of freedom and sovereignty. It's a type of course I'm just kind of putting together for people who want to know and understand sovereignty and their rights. Um, and it is basically all that we need to know to be free. And this is taken from a lot of resources, particularly Fam Guardian. And I can post links and I can post information to that website, and also God's Kingdom Ministries .org, both of which have helped me really help, yeah, just really help me to understand the law, understand my rights, understand purpose, understand ownership, understand how to, yeah, just to live and exist in this place in a proper and fair way, free and fair way, I would say. So the purpose of this video, guys, is to inform the general public of their inherent rights. I want you guys to understand, as much as I would like to understand, what we were never taught, that we should have been taught in school and all throughout our lives, which is the basics of law, of government, how these things work, of understanding contract law, understanding contracts, understanding the different types of rights and these types of things. I would also like to champion a cause that I believe in personally, that is personal power. I think that the reason why there's so much pain, heartache, evil, destruction in this world is because people have their power, their creative power, taken away from them. And I will show you a quote on the next slide that's going to really, I think, is a very impactful quote to see and know. The third thing I'm doing, and the reason for this video is I'm teaching to learn. That's one of the ways that I learn, is I like to go out and I like to teach what I'm learning. I like to ask questions, and I always am learning to share, always learning to teach, and that's very important for me. And then lastly, to offer help to those people who are 9 to 5ers, who want to know about sovereignty, want to know about their freedoms, want to know about how to have justice in their lives and to avoid injustice and to avoid essentially participating in this culture, which has gotten is far from what the Constitution has prepared for its people. So those 9 to 5ers who really want to go and dig into this information, but just don't have the time. You got kids, you got family, you got people, you got stuff that you're doing. You're just constantly busy, and maybe you have a 15-minute, 20-minute drive somewhere, and you're able to listen to this. Great, this video is for you. I hope to make it anywhere from 15 to 17 minutes, guys. 15 to maybe 20 minutes. I'll give you that, because your brother, that is me, I can be long-winded sometimes. So we're gonna go into it. So here is this quote from Frederick Mann and Wake Up America, the dynamics of human power. And he says, to feel that we are worthwhile individuals, to know that we exist, we have to express our power. That is, to feel that we are in control. This imperative to express our power and to experience control is central to human behavior. Every human does something to express his or her power in the world. Humans first attempt to express their power creatively. If such attempts fail repeatedly, they experience themselves as powerless. And then they, express themselves, they express themselves as powerless. What they experience is that they cannot make a positive difference in their own lives or in the world. A cognitive breakdown occurs between their actions and the results that they produce. Mentally and intellectually, they cease to understand the connection between their behavior and the consequences of their behavior. Then they express their behavior destructively. So we can either express our power creatively or we can express our power destructively. This phenomenon is at the root of practically all individual and societal problems. And again, that goes back to the reason I'm doing this is I want to empower people, and I feel that the best way to do that is for them to have understanding. Proverbs 4:7 in the Bible says that the beginning of wisdom is this, to get wisdom, and in all you're getting, to get understanding. It also talks about how God's people or the Creator's people, they perish for lack of understanding and knowledge. Yeshua, Jesus in the Bible, great teacher, prophet, God, he has spoken and he has said, constantly hear and understand. That is to see, to understand and to perceive, to understand and see the deeper things. And again, I don't mean to make this a sermon, but but it is very important that we understand and we acknowledge some type of source or creator, right? We got to start somewhere, right? Everything has to start somewhere, and we also want to start somewhere. So here's an overview of what we're going to be going over. Not every principle will we be going over today, but we're only going to hit one principle today with as much time as we have right now. So an overview of the principle. We are going to be talking about how freedom begins with acknowledging the source of all freedom and sovereignty, that is God or the Creator. Freedom. We will understand freedom is the result of accepting God or the Creator's dominion, mandate, and delegation order. That is to say, taking complete and personal responsibility for ourselves and the management of His property. And again, we will go into each of these in detail once we get to those slides, but this is just an overview. Another principle is that we all start out equal. What does that mean? The only way to lose sovereignty, property, or equality lawfully to a de jure government, and we will explain what a de jure government is. It is basically a government that rules by force and by threatening people and by fraud. Or equality lawfully to a de jure government under the operation of a civil statutory law is to consent to it. So your consent is extremely important. We'll be talking about consent. We'll talk about the three different types of rights: public, private, and constitutional rights. We'll talk about the two types of property: public and private property, and how one becomes another, and what the Constitution is for, which is to basically keep your private rights private and separate the separation of public and private rights. We'll talk about the two different types of government: the government by consent, which is a de facto government, and a government by fraud and force, which is a de jure government. And we will talk about the mechanism used by governments to lawfully convert private property to public property, and we call that a franchise or benefit. We'll talk about the different franchises that exist, just to give you some kind of example. A citizen is a franchise. A driver is a franchise. Who else is a franchise? A taxpayer is a franchise. A spouse is a franchise. So all these are franchise because you get certain benefits for claiming that. And if you claim that name, then you are essentially the property of the government. So then we'll talk about the civil statutory codes, which are a voluntary government civil franchise in which the U.S. Supreme Court has called a social compact. Social compact. So we'll move on. So we're going to go over that first one, guys. Freedom begins with acknowledging the source of all freedom and sovereignty, and that source is God. God is the creator of the universe. There is a source, there is a creator, there is something that exists out there outside of ourselves that has made things come into being, and this is not to it's just really not up for debate, guys. There is a creator, and that's the way it is. If you want to live in a society in which you have freedoms, you got to acknowledge that someone is the source of those, and it's not us. Because if that's the case, then anybody can do whatever they want to do, and as long as everyone agrees with it, then that's okay, right? And no one cultural relativism just doesn't fly, right? Because then you look at those people over in Africa who are cutting off the genitals of women, right? And then that's their culture, right? But you know that it's morally reprehensible, right? We understand and know, right? Because we understand that their inherent values, worth. There's objective moral values and objective moral truth, and so that's my only defense of that. Our next point is that God gave humans dominion, a dominion mandate. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form. He did all things, and then on the I believe it was the sixth day, He created man in His likeness and our image, and His likeness and in His image, right? And He gave them two mandates: a dominion mandate and a fruitfulness mandate. And He lent His property to humanity with certain conditions. We also have to understand that the Bible is a trust indenture that manages God's property. So, and here we have a little thing. This is a trust indenture. A trust indenture is an agreement in a bond contract made between a bond issuer and a trustee that represents the bond's interest. And so the key takeaways from it that we can see is a trust indenture is a legal and binding contract made between bond issuer and the trustee. So you and I, from what I understand from this definition, are trustees, guys. A trust indenture describes the bond's characteristics, right? So, and the terms of its callability, right? So, it basically tells you what to do. Here's this property. Here's what to do with it. Here's how to make sure that you abide by the rules, laws, statutes of the person who this belongs to, right? And there's another takeaway there, but that's all we need to know for right now. Another point, guys, the Bible delegates a portion of His sovereignty to us. So God actually gives us some of His sovereignty. God, the creator of the universe, has given us His sovereignty, and a part of that sovereignty is basically the consciousness that we have, right? The knowledge, the awareness that we have. That's a part of the gift that He's given us. Being aware, having freedom, having the choice, free will is one of those things. But He has delegated a portion of His sovereignty to us. Now, this is where it kind of gets a little sticky for people, right? Because we are only sovereign while acting under that delegation order, right? So whatever He has called us to do, whatever duty He has called us to do, we have to abide within that framework. Okay, so we are sovereign only when in that framework. That is to say, I guess we'll explain it in the next slide. So another point: natural rights correspond to every duty under God's dominion mandate. So people talk about having natural rights all the time, but these natural rights are associated with God's dominion mandate. So you can't really have one without the other. And that's basically you wanting to have some rights, and basically you want to have some rights without you having to do anything, right? And so wanting something for nothing is called theft. If you want natural rights, if you want these natural rights, the ability to choose for yourself and live the way that you want to live that doesn't harm other people, then there's a mandate, right? There's a mandate that we have to be aware of, and there's certain boundaries that we have to be aware of, and I think that's good, and I think that's important. So this thing talks about natural rights, and this is just a little thing that I pulled up, right? And this personal beliefs and values, that is basically the natural rights that we're talking about. Your personal right. Hey, listen, if you want to drink apple juice 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then that's your personal belief and values. Doesn't harm anybody else, might harm yourself. Too much of anything can be a bad thing, and we obviously want to avoid too much of anything in that situation. But here's a couple things that if you want to look at, great. So we're gonna summarize principle 1, and I know I'm coming up on short time here, but basically God is the creator of all things, We see this in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And by the way, as a Christian, if I were to define myself as one, I would say that a Christian is a person who sees the Bible as a law book and does their best to abide by those laws and principles with the inspiration and the help of the Creator. Right? God has ownership and sovereignty. Right? Leviticus 23 to 24 and 25 says, God says, all the land is mine, right? He has the right of creation. And right, because whatever you create, you own, right? If you made a table and a desk, right, you would be able to determine, you made it, you determine what its height, width, length is, and you determine the rules for that table. You could say, hey, you shouldn't set coffee pots on this table because it'll make a ring on the table or something like that. So God has a sovereignty over all things in the world because He created all things in the world, physical and immaterial. So then God determines the laws, regulations, rules for creation, right? And He has that by the right of creation. Now, the law is representative of God's nature, character, and function. So whoever God is, it will be reflected in His law. So whoever God is, it will be reflected in His law and in His treatment. Well, just in His law, basically. That's it. And so we see God's nature, character, and function in His law. And of course, we know in the Scripture, the New Testament, First John chapter 4 talks about love, right? Brothers, let us love one another because love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God because God is love, right? So that is the nature. That is the essential nature of God's character and function is love, right? Love does no harm to a neighbor. And love is ultimately the fulfillment of the law, right? That's what Yeshua said. Love is the fulfillment of the law. And that love means, hey, listen, you do what you do. You don't harm me. I won't harm you. What's yours is yours. What's mine is mine. And there is a just relationship between us because I'm not going to get in your business, and I'm not going to bring any harm to you, right? And that's the nature of love, right? It's also charitable and loving and forgiving, right? Those types of things. But that is God's nature. We understand that the law is spiritual in nature, and that is Romans chapter. I think that's Romans 7:14. The law is spiritual in nature, but it can have physical applications. So for those of you guys reading the Old Testament with your 21st century lens without understanding the culture, context, and code of what was happening during that time, and you guys want to pull those things out and say God is this because He said this at this point in time without understanding and knowing the context of the civilization, the situation, or anything else that's going on, I don't know. It's hard to it will be hard to make any defense on that, right? But what we can say is that if we understand that the law is spiritual in nature, right? Because God is a spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom, right? That's what the Scripture says. The law is spiritual in nature, meaning that it first and foremost applies to that which is intangible, right? And that which is unseen is eternal. That's what the Scripture says. So that which is tangible inside of us, intangible inside of us, right? So your choice, your free will, you can't really feel your free will. You can't really feel love. You can't really feel beauty. You can see it, right? But it's something that's innate, right? And so again, these laws first apply spiritually, and that is again very, very important. But they do have physical implications, and they do have and can have physical applications. God has given man authority. This is important. God has given man authority, and authority is God's sovereignty, basically with conditions, right? So God says, "Hey, go ahead and take the land. You have dominion over the birds and the beasts and the creeping things and all these other things, but you have dominion with my laws under certain conditions, right? Which means that you don't abuse my property, that you don't abuse, use, or destroy anything that belongs to me, right? Because I'm giving you authority to delegate, but in order to delegate, there are certain principles and certain expectations that I have and the way that you delegate it. I don't want you. I don't want you doing certain things to certain people at certain times, and I think that that's fair because by he has the right of ownership, right? He's the creator of all things, and he has the right of ownership. And so God has given you authority and me authority, which is great, but just with conditions. And so we have to understand what those conditions are and be willing to abide by them if we want to have those natural rights and freedoms, right? As long as we delegate God's property according to God's nature, His character, then we have freedom and we have natural rights. As long as we do that, right? And no one's saying that you have to. We're not saying go to church every Sunday. I don't go to church every Sunday. We don't. We're not talking about wearing a tie, having a Bible on you all the time, slapping people over the head with the Bible. In fact, the institution of religion is deplorable in my opinion, and probably in God's opinion too, seeing as how Jesus was very much so against the religious institution and the statuses and the privileges that they had, which benefited them, but created an unequal opportunity for other people, which is unfortunate. And he was very much against that. And I think that all institutions create inherent inequality in whether it be a pastor and a sheep, or whether it be in the ministry or somewhere else. There's always this. There's always an equal or an inferior position which you are forced to consent to, right? And so I don't like to consent to that. I don't want to participate in a society or any type of religious society that perpetuates inequality through its statuses and its privileges. Lastly, hey, listen, if we violate God's nature, character, right, and that's His law, right, if we violate His character and nature, then we can't claim natural rights or sovereignty. And I think I already pointed that out, but I wanted to make that super clear. We can't do that. You can't just go around killing people, murdering people, selling people, using them as property. You can't do that because God said that all men have inherent value, worth, intrinsically, right? And so all men are God's property, and you have to do unto others as you would really have them do unto you, right? And so God wants all men to be equal. He does not want inferior positions, particularly in His law. He doesn't want us to treat each other with inferiority or with an imbalance. He says an unbalanced scale is an abomination to the Lord. That's what He says Himself. So super, super important, guys, that we understand this. And again, whether you're, I guess the one last thing I will point out is, yes, this is a lot of religious talk. It is a lot of religious talk. I'm kind of taking you to church here for a second, but I promise you I'm not going to make you pay tithe or anything else like that, or try and get in your pockets or try and guilt trip you and make you feel like a terrible person. But what I will do is I'll say this, that laws are the ways that cultures codify their morality. Laws are the ways that cultures, codify their morality. Religion is what defines morality. So all law is religious in nature, inherently, right? So very important to understand that, because you have to ask yourself, well, what laws do you abide by, and what is the source of that law, right? Because if the source of that law is, well, whoever the source of that law is, that's God, okay? And so we have to be consistent with God's nature, His delegation, so that way when we put people up, when we give consent to a government that is going to govern us, that they govern under the same delegation that God has given. And so right now, the government that we have consented to governing us, which I personally don't want them to, I don't want to consent to it, and I'm finding my way out of that. They have taken that power and they've gone off and done some unlawful stuff with it. So we are basically rejecting that. So, well, all that to be said, much appreciate much appreciated, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this first one. And these will continue to be exactly the same, and I promise I will be consistent with it. Well, I'm not going to promise, but I think I can be consistent with this, and this is something that I enjoy doing, as you can see, and it's something that I've put a lot of time and effort into doing. So, blessed you guys, and hope you enjoy it. Please, if you got anything out of this, share it with somebody. Just share it with somebody, one person, your wife, your kids, I don't know, someone that you don't like. We'll see you on the next episode.